Well, obviously, I'd seen most of his movies, and obviously respect him as a very, very, very fine filmmaker. But at that stage of my career, when they first asked David Tomlin asked me to work on Barry Lyndon, I just made a step forward. And every time you make a step up in the film industry, or it used to be, it doesn't matter anymore today because anybody's anything since the advert of all the student filmmaking.
Right.
We have everybody thinks they're producer, director, writers, which of course is rubbish. But in those days, you had to move up very, very slowly, and you really had to know what you were doing. It was a much better training system. Mm-hmm. But of course, I didn't want to work on that movie as a second assistant director purely because I didn't want to step back down again to something I've been doing for a few years. And that was I didn't like not doing that because, one always wants to try and work with the very best people in the movie industry, and I've been lucky enough to work with a lot of very good ones.
Yeah.
A lot of bad ones, too, I might add, but, I won't name those for the moment. I'll save those for my book.
You do. You're writing a book, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
But then, of course, so I was sad that I wasn't able to work with Stanley, and that's why I hated the idea of working as a location manager, to be honest with you, because I think it's one of the most thankless tasks in the film industry. Mm-hmm. If you do everything well, nobody gives you any thanks, and the moment you make one mistake, which is so easy to do in that position, you get absolutely slaughtered. So it's a thankless task, and really is very specialist job where you need more than anything to have the right personality for it to be able to get on with people. I met not that many really great location managers in my life, and there are very few sort of Frank Ernst in the world who were excellent in those roles. And I have worked with one or two, but it's a very difficult job, very important job too, and very underrated. And I didn't particularly fancy the idea of doing it, but I thought, well, I would do it, Right. And then, of course, when David left to start directing, Stanley asked me to take over, which was great, and I really was delighted.
Did you guys click at once, you and Kubrick?
Well, I was very lucky because they'd been preparing Barry Lyndon for many months in England, and when I came on board, Stanley decided, for whatever reason, whether because the Clockwork Orange was getting such a pounding in England in the press, and that to move on and make the film in Ireland. Whether he fancied a little break from England for a while, I'm not sure. But anyway, we should have been in Ireland anyway in the first place, but Stanley originally wanted to make it all, within an hour of his home, which of course proved impossible. So I was lucky enough to sort of be the first person to go out to Ireland with Ken Adam, the designer, and one of the art directors. We flew out to Cork, and then we started, set up in Waterford and started scouting, and then Stanley came over with the family. And so I used to go out every day with Ken Adam, and Stanley used to drive. And so we went for weeks looking at locations and sending photographers out all over the countryside, looking and photographing stuff. And so I got to know Stanley very well on all those trips. So it was sort of an easy introduction for me on a very casual way rather than the sort of full-on working on a film set all day long.
Yeah.
So it became a lot easier for me. So I got to know him pretty well, and we got on well. And so, he asked me then to take over when David left after the first 6 weeks to carry on shooting for the next year or whatever it was we shot for.
Was there any delineation between your personal interactions with him and on and off the set? Because, I've heard that the working situation with people that you are friendly with can be much different from your off time alone with him. Or was he the same personality on and off the set?
Yeah, Stanley was pretty much the same, I would say. He was a lot more relaxed during pre-production and post-production, Stanley. He really didn't enjoy the shooting so much. He preferred the pre-production and post-production. He didn't like being tied down to the actual shooting and having to commit himself to do something. But, Stanley was a very tough taskmaster, which you have to be in the film industry to make it to the top. I mean, the guys who are considered difficult directors like James Cameron or Michael Mann or Michael Cimino, Stanley, John Gilliman, these sort of guys, they know what Hollywood's all about. You've got to be tough, otherwise you're going to get the shit beaten out of you by studio guys and ruthless producers, So to get to the top, you've got to be tough. And Stanley was a very astute businessman and a very tough taskmaster, and he pushed himself pretty hard too. I mean, Stanley didn't. He was totally focused on what he was doing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Mm. And the people in key positions with him, it was exactly the same, really.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, the real key people had a tough job with Stanley. Production designer, cameraman, assistant director, editor. Those sort of key roles were very, very difficult with him. And you notice a lot of those people filled those roles, as they do with most big directors, a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. Because once they find somebody who they find is good, they obviously like to keep using them. Right. Particularly if it's someone you like and you get on with. I mean, so much of it is, it's nicer if you actually get on with the people a little bit,
Yeah. You've worked on so many great films, and looking over your resume, I have a particular fondness for Year of the Dragon and Casualties of War. Those are among two of my favorites. But Barry Lyndon, what was unique about this production among all the many others that you've worked on?
Well, Barry Lyndon was really like a big adventure. I mean, we started off in England, then we went to Ireland, then we left Ireland. We came back to England. We sort of ran out of locations there, and came back to England and shot in England. Then we went to Germany and shot the second unit. I went out there with Dougie Milsom and about 7 crew, and then we picked up local crew, and we shot out there for about 8 weeks. And, Stanley obviously didn't come with us on that, and we just shot a lot of second unit stuff. Mm-hmm. And it was very good in those days because there were no mobile phones, so Stanley could never... It found very difficult to communicate with us, which was horrendous. We used to just go and shoot all the material that had been mapped out, and then we'd move on to the next location, and then he'd ring up us there so later and catch us and tell us to go back and redo it, Mm. So that was great fun on that film. I enjoyed that Germany more than anywhere. We had a really great time. Then we shot up in Scotland and Wales doing run-bys, and that was fun, yeah. And that was a very, very good time, very relaxed time, that sort of stuff. Barry Lyndon was a very tough movie to make. It wasn't an easy film. Like all those big period films are tough to make, I mean, they're all exactly the same. It's the same old problem. Everyone has to be there 4:30 in the morning and getting everyone ready, and the rain, and particularly in places like Ireland, shooting the exteriors, where you have a terrific problem with the light all the time and trying to control it. It's so difficult.
Yeah. And the lighting in the film, I mean, when people talk about Barry Lyndon, inevitably it all comes back to the innovation
to the use of the 7.0 lenses, the old NASA lenses, and that stuff did with the candlelight. That did look terrific, no question about it. Although very difficult to shoot because of the very tiny depth of field that you had with those particular lenses.
Yeah.
And of course, Stanley had them all. Ed DiGiulio fitted them all onto an old BNC camera. So it was a very difficult job. Very difficult job for Dougie Milsom, who was the focus puller on that movie. I mean, that was a very, very tough film for him. I mean, he did a fantastic job, really. Because Stanley is very, very tough on guys in those positions. In fact, he promoted both Johnny Alcott, who used to be the camera assistant on 2001, made him a cameraman on Clockwork, and he promoted Dougie after The Shining and Barry Lyndon to be the cameraman on Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah.
One thing Stanley was terrific at is if he saw someone who he thought had potential, was young, very enthusiastic, hardworking, and had some talent, he would give any young person a break in that role. So, it was rather nice to have a sort of mixture of old campaigners, people who are really very experienced, and some good young people. Of course, with Stanley being the hours you had to work, I mean... I think there were a few marriages that came apart through the years over the long hours. But there had never knowing when you were going to finish.
There had to have also been a sense that he would challenge you more than any other director and bring out the best in you. Did you get that sense from him?
I mean, the thing with Stanley was that he always would have a million things for you to do. the only way you survived with him was making sure that you learned how to do them in the right order. And Stanley's ideas weren't always the best ideas, of course. I mean, he did have some very good ideas, but a lot of them were pretty pointless, and many times before we knew we would be reverting back to the old tried and trusted method. But of course, you always went round Stanley's way of doing it. And it was difficult for new people coming on board. I used to often say to one or two people who eventually left us, I used to say, "You'll just hang back and wait. This will all change around later on, but you've got to play Stanley's system. You can't, it's no good going steaming in and having a match. Of course we know this isn't going to happen, and we're going to build sets and we're going to build streets on the back lot. We know all that. Stanley knows it really, but I mean, he'll try every other possible way to be there."
Yeah.
But, a lot of people, it's difficult for them to get into that system if you're used to working on a normal movie where you've got a set schedule, which people are actually going to try and achieve. And, that never entered into it for Stanley.
Yeah.
He got to a situation where he was very, very money conscious, Stanley. I mean, he was the hardest nut on money. It was very difficult to make a good deal with him. And he kept the crew very small, apart from when you were shooting huge scenes, when, of course, we had the proper people. But, I mean, he was very much aware that he was going to take his time to shoot a film. So he would keep the running costs. He was more interested in the running costs, the weekly running costs, than the schedule.
But tell me about the style of shooting, and because you hear about the numerous takes and so forth. Tell me about that process and how the scenes evolved, the way he allowed them to play.
You would always, before anything happened, would be getting the set dressed properly and getting it lit properly before he'd even start to think about getting the actors in to rehearse even, because, he wanted to create the whole atmosphere of what the scene was going to be about. A lot of people don't work that way, and of course they don't have time to do that. Then he'd sit down with the actors and work through the scenes and then rewrite them, send them off to them again, and come back the next day, whatever, while we then sat down and spent days or weeks or hours lighting the sets properly to the eventual scene that had been written or changed, or in some cases not, but invariably it will be a long rehearsing process with Stanley,
Yeah.
And a lot of involvement with the actors. I mean, a lot of people often said, I've heard them say Stanley wasn't good with actors. I thought he was exceptional with actors. He gave them every chance to do whatever they wanted, really. I mean, and put in their own ideas, and he would listen, and he would try things. And I thought he was a very good director with actors, actually. I mean, far better than most of them come across.
Well, I find
most of them spend too much time talking to the stars. I mean, the stars are never going to change their. I've yet to meet a director who's changed a major star and a wonderful actor's performance. The really top people, because unless you cast them properly, you're fucked. I mean, because, they're going to come, these real big guys come with their own ideas, and very hard to get them to change a character.
Well, I was talking to Leon Vitali for this series, and it illuminated something for me when I hear about how he worked on Eyes Wide Shut, for example, which you worked on as well with Mr. Kubrick.
Sure, cool.
I mean that he would be in that apartment or whatever location we're discussing with these actors, and he would kind of allow the actors to find the scene in the process of doing it. So when you hear reports of the ultra-controlling director with actors, I don't think controlling directors do that. They come with exactly what they want. Yeah.
I mean, William Wyler didn't do that. I mean, the top guys just come in and say, right, play the scene. Let's have a look what you're going to do.
Yeah.
I mean, you can do this with proper actors. Of course, it's very difficult to do this when you've got just medium-type artists,
Now, The Shining. We have to discuss The Shining, of course. Tell me about.
Wonderful picture.
I love that picture, and that picture just deepens for me every time I see it. My enjoyment of it. Tell me what memories come to mind to you about that shoot.
It took a long time. Well, first of all, Jack was an absolute joy to work with. I mean, he really is. He and Dustin Hoffman, of the actors I've worked with, are right up there as two of the top six that I've come across. Both to work with generous people, nice guys, absolutely brilliant artists. Pleasure to work with. I've been lucky enough to do 3 films with Jack. So But yeah, he was terrific, Jack. And of course, for the first month, they were like sort of snakes, really. Stanley and Jack whittling around, and then once we sorted the hours that Jack was going to work out, we were fine, and then we got on with it. Yeah, Jack was no fool.
Yeah.
I used to say to Tom, really, you should have checked with Jack about what it's like working with us, because he wouldn't have stood for any of this nonsense being here till 10 o'clock at night. No, Jack's, he sussed it all out pretty quickly, and yeah, he's a very cool operator. He got on very well with Stanley, though. He was wonderful in the film, I thought. A lot of people said that he overacted. I certainly didn't think so. I thought it was a fabulous performance.
I think so too. And
very good. I mean, it was a tough movie to make because we built it all. Everything was built in the studio on the back lot. I mean, apart from a bit of second unit stuff at the beginning of the film and a couple of long shots up in Oregon of a hotel, but everything else, was built. He did a wonderful job on that film. The guy who did a fantastic job was Roy Walker, the production designer, of course.
Mm-hmm. And what's there?
Johnny was the cameraman, Johnny Alcott.
And the set that you built, I would imagine it was built very expansively for freedom.
At every stage at the studio. Yeah, massive.
And it allowed for kind of freedom of motion because you guys were experimenting with the Steadicam, which was quite new at the time.
Very much so. And I must say, Garrett was fantastic. I mean, I've been lucky enough to work with 2 or 3 really top-class Steadicam people through the years, most of them through Garrett. And he did a wonderful job on that film. I mean, mind you, it went on a bit longer than he ever thought, but in the end, he used to come backwards and forwards on the old Concorde to New York. He used to save up the Steadicam shots for it. But yeah, he was terrific, Garrett Brown. I mean, a great technician, and Stanley liked him very much, and he did a terrific job. And it's not easy waving that thing around for someone like Stanley Kubrick. It's not like doing it on an episode of The Bill on television, when you're with Stanley. I mean, the framing's got to be perfect all the time.
Yeah. About the framing. Did he storyboard? Did he find most things at the location on the day?
Stanley never storyboarded anything. He's not a Ridley in that way. I mean, those sort of Brian De Palma or anything like that. No, Stanley is very much. No, he's not a storyboard man. Mm-hmm. Stanley didn't really do action movies. The only time you want to worry about storyboards is on action films, because storyboards, to me, are a complete waste of time on an ordinary film, I think, because, how can you storyboard something until you see how the actors are going to play the scene? Yeah. You can write. I mean, I've worked with directors who do shot lists that are a mile long. Well, you're never going to shoot them all in the scheduled time on general films. And, I've worked with guys who put down every single shot that you can imagine that you'd want to do. And it's complete rubbish, Complete waste of their time and waste of everybody else's. I mean, it's useful sometimes to sketch down what you want to do. Once you've seen the scene played, then, of course, you work out how you're going to cover it. And then you make notes of what you're going to do, and you go from there. Yeah. But storyboarding, different thing on an action movie or a big CGI movie, you've got to do it. That's a different story. But on a standard movie, I think it's a complete waste of time if you're a director who knows what you're doing. Right. Well, the reason... you don't really see... Ridley, of course, and Tony and people like that are wonderful artists, so they find it easier to draw out to people to explain what they want. But, Brian De Palma does a sort of matchstick board job with storyboarding, and he sticks pretty much to them, funnily enough. But he does a lot more action movies, Brian, so you do need storyboards on the action, particularly when you're using second units as well. You've got to intermingle everything. And he has these very complex... I personally think that they're a waste of time on an ordinary film, which is, just an ordinary drama. Complete waste of time. Right. And De Palma has these, because we've done a series of tribute shows on De Palma as well, and spoken to him on the show. We're crazy about De Palma, but he also has these very elaborate... He's known for his elaborate sequences. Yes, well, Brian does a lot of, very complicated setups. He's very, very good at that, Brian. I mean... Brian's not such a great communicator with the actors, I don't think, personally. I mean, I've only worked with him once. He asked me to do a couple of other films. I enjoyed it very much. He has very good people with him. He's very well organized. He knows what he's doing. Not a terrific communicator. So I don't think he enjoys too much of that. But I must say I enjoyed working with him, and enjoyed the first time I worked with Sean Penn, who I've been lucky enough to work with 3 times.
Yeah.
Who I think is a top-class director. I mean,
he's excellent.
Sean tends not to do commercial movies, but he really is a very fine director. Well, he's a wonderful actor, obviously, and a very nice guy. I mean, he's a good guy, one of the really good young guys. He'll make some really fantastic movie one day directing. No question about it in my mind.
I love his films. Yeah.
Oh, top class. I mean, I've done 2 with him.
The Pledge and Crossing Guard. Yeah.
Yeah, but The Pledge was a good movie.
Very much.
With Jack. And, Sean is terrific. I mean, I will be amazed if he is nominated as a director one day for an Oscar.
In terms of...
I'd certainly like to be around when he does that.
I'm sure it's going to happen. In terms of working with actors, the question that always comes up with The Shining was the different approach that Kubrick had with Nicholson and Shelley Duvall. And I look at Shelley Duvall's performance in The Shining, and I think she even says it in the documentary that his approach to her was a means to an end to get her to a certain place, because that is one of the great performances of that decade and of that genre.
It was difficult for Shelley because, half the time she's crying, and, we used to have to adopt the approach that Stanley, myself, and one of my assistants gave her a really hard time. And my other assistant, Michael Stevenson, and Doug Twitty, who was the production manager, so the line producer, used to be really fatherly to her. That was our approach with Shelley. Of course, she did get a hard time. I mean, Jack used to go home at 7:30 every night, and we used to work on with Shelley till 10 o'clock,
Mm-hmm.
But she was good, Shelley, but it was a very tough role for her.
Yeah.
And she used to sort of argue. Stanley was amazing, really. He used to say to her, she used to ask him, typical Stanley, he had an answer for everybody. And she'd say to him, what do you want me to do? And all that type of dialogue you get from some people. And you say, look, Shelley, you're the actress, do something brilliant. Just walk away. That was his approach. But she was very good in the film, and the little boy was fabulous. He did a terrific job. But that was Leon, actually, who had a tremendous amount to do with that. He looked after him, worked with him all the time, used to bring him in each day. Did a terrific job on that film, Leon Spitali, looking after Dan, the little Danny. He did a great job, Leon, on that. He really helped coaching him and looking after him. It's so difficult with young kids. You need somebody with them all the time, with their lines, and helping them, and just watching them and looking after them and the family and everything.
He never discussed meaning, the meaning of his films with the actors or the crew, did he? Well, I wouldn't say Stanley. He used to say to me, let the French critics work out what this is supposed to mean. Yeah, he never worried too much. When we didn't know what we were doing, he used to say to me that often. He'd say, well, the French critics will tell us what this is supposed to be about. Mm. Well, The Shining especially, because, and we're talking to many people that have written about it over the years, there seems to be this, not since 2001 in his career have there been so many interpretations of the meaning of things. And it's a film that you can enjoy and appreciate as a horror film, as a film of that genre, but there's also all kinds of interpretations people have. Well, everyone's going to form their own interpretation about a film like The Shining. I mean, it's a sort of when I first read it, actually, I was going off to South Africa to do a movie, and Stanley called me up to the house to read it and to take the book and read it. All treble spaced, so the book was, like two volumes of the Encyclopedia Britannica. Mm. And then when I asked him about who was going to be in it, and he told me Jack, and then when I read it, I thought, Christ, this is going to be a really good movie. Mm-hmm. And I could clearly see it, once reading something when you've got an idea who's going to play the part. But, it just shows you what a shrewd actor Jack Nicholson is. He rings up a lot of the very top directors to check what they're doing, and he'd rung Stanley to see what he's up to and see if there's anything suitable for him. And, of course, that's how he came into being The Shining. Yeah. And he's worked with... We didn't really... Sorry? And the thing that strikes me about Nicholson is that you're right, he has worked with the top and the most interesting filmmakers. I mean, Antonioni and... Yeah.
You know, it's funny. It's very funny in a small way. I always thought Jack just turned up and did it naturally because he's that sort of guy. Mm-hmm. But on The Pledge at the end of the movie, we sort of went over, of course, and Jack's contract was going to be up, so they had a huge overage on him, and they were trying to work out some sort of deal with him where they could put it at the back end because he was, you know, on not huge money. And Sean and I went to Caravan one day to see him and talk about it. And we were in there, and Jack said, fine, well, what are we going to do about these things if we cut some of these things? And he brought out his little box like Stanley used to have with every scene on it. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, if we cut that, it means I can't do this here where I was going to do that. And I suddenly realized that Jack had every scene laid out with what he planned to do, whereas I'd always, through the years, had thought this all came naturally. So, you know, Jack is a very, very shrewd guy who really thinks about what he's doing.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I thought that was something that really impressed me, actually. A truly wonderful actor, and got on terrifically well with Stanley, really. And funnily enough, on The Pledge, I remember one day asking him, I said, do you want to rehearse this scene, Jack? And he said to me, Cookie, he said, I did all the rehearsing for the rest of my career on The Shining. Just shoot these things.
Oh, that's great.
That's typical. It's typical, you know. Of course, he got on very well with Sean. I mean, he loves Sean.
Yeah.
And Sean knows how to interact, obviously, with the actors so well. That's why, you know, he really knows what he's doing. I mean, the top actors are better directors than 75% of the directors you come across. Mm-hmm. I mean, you know, really, they do most of it anyway. People like Dustin Hoffman are all stage working like mad, give better performances off screen than they do sometimes on screen in their own close-ups, you know, to try and get other pictures, drag it out of other lesser actors, you know. Mm-hmm. Really wonderful to watch.
Now, you actually, you went on and did many other films after The Shining, so it was the better part of, you know, it's probably 17 years until you hooked up with Mr. Kubrick again. What was that dynamic like?
Well, I went down to Australia with an old pal of mine, David Hemmings, to produce a couple of movies for him, and which I loved it down there. And we bought a house, and my daughter was only one, so I stayed there and operated from there for a few years. And so then Stanley wanted me to do Full Metal Jacket, and I came back to England to see him. The only time I ever had no problem making a deal with him, funnily enough, because he actually needed me. But it was a very difficult time for us because we had two very young kids. They just started school, and we had a house in Melbourne. So I just finished Year of the Dragon. I was pretty knackered because that was a tough movie. And I thought, oh, God, a year in the East End of London. I tried to make a deal with Stanley. I said, well, you'll never agree to pay me. I'll need a car because I need a house because our house is too small now in London. We've still got... Stanley said, I was having dinner with Stanley at his house. He said to me, Christ, he said, Brian, it's harder making a deal with you than it is with the leading man. But so I didn't actually do the movie in the end. I went back to Australia, and it was just too difficult for us to come back to England for a year. I knew it would be a year, you know, so a minimum a year, really. And also it was in a horrible part of London, down in the gasworks, and I thought, oh, this is not for me. Right. So I gave that one a miss. I recommended my assistant, Terry Needham, do it, who did the movie, who was an excellent assistant. And so I then... of course, Stanley asked me to come back and do Eyes Wide Shut. So then I came back. I was living in California. I came back and came back to London and stayed in London, really. Operated from here since. My mother was getting pretty old. And so anyway, we're all back in England now.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed that. And I was here for like 2.5 years on that film or something. So.
Oh, wow. And I've about his style of shooting, as you alluded to before, his kind of fiscal responsibility. His sets didn't look like anyone else's sets because I've heard that those scenes were very intimate, and many times there were just a couple of crew present.
Yes, very much so. On Eyes Wide Shut, you mean?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we had a very small crew on the movie anyway. I mean, it was a very small picture, Eyes Wide Shut. I mean, most directors would have gone and shot it in New York in 12 weeks, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That would have been the normal way to do it. But, you know, not Stanley's operation wouldn't do that. And, I mean, first of all, he liked to work from home, and he was very happy doing that. He was never going to go away. I sort of think when I saw this thing recently about Peter Jackson, you know, arguing about leaving New Zealand. I mean, Peter Jackson's like Stanley. There's no way. He's made a lot of money for studios. He's not going to come and shoot in London for 2 years or 3 years or something and leave his house in New Zealand and everything. He's not that sort of guy. He's a Stanley type of person.
Right.
You know? If you want him to do the film, you're going to have to do it the way he wants it done. And he's been very successful, so, you know, good luck to him.
Yeah, why not?
Talented guy. I think he is like a Stanley, really a sort of self-made filmmaker, really. Teach yourself.
Mm-hmm. I
mean, the nearest person I've worked with to Stanley visually, I suppose, and it's got very similar in many, many ways, is Ridley Scott, you know, but Ridley gets on with it a lot quicker, you know. But, I mean, he's a brilliant visual director.
Very much, and he very much idolizes Kubrick. He's very influenced by him.
Yeah, he does. I know. Yeah, he's a very, very fine director, though. Ridley Scott visually, about as good as anybody.
Absolutely.
I mean, you know, I wouldn't. I mean, he's another person who's not such a terrific communicator with the actors in a way. You know, he sort of gets on and sets it all up and knows what he's doing, and has very good actors with him. And I you know, agree that less is best sometimes with a lot of these very fine actors.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's no good sitting down with them for hours and hours and talking, you know, theory. You've got to get them and get out there and let's see what they can do.
Yeah, just do it, yeah.
And yeah, if you've got the right people, it shapes, it forms itself. Of course, if you've got the wrong people, you're in trouble. So that's difficult. But, no, Stanley was a master of that. I mean, Cimino was a great visual director, too, the people I've worked with. I mean, tremendous visual. Michael, I mean, you know, as good as anybody on big canvas. All these guys are big canvas filmmakers. A lot of people aren't. A lot of directors can only really work on a small canvas, smaller story. You know, the David Leans and Francis Coppola's and the Ridleys and Michael Manns and James Cameron. These were Stanley, big canvas filmmakers.
Yeah.
And, you know, then there's a lot of very, very good filmmakers who work very well on a smaller scale. I would say the greatest of those would probably be Sidney Lumet.
Yep.
That I've worked with.
I'm with you on that. Absolutely.
I mean, you know, without any question, the one guy that I thought was certainly the best organised I've ever seen in the movie industry in my 40-odd years.
And you did Billy Bathgate.
And a pleasure to work with.
No, Billy Bathgate was Benton, wasn't it? It was
a very nice man, the nicest American director you could ever work with. He is the equivalent of Michael Anderson and Lewis Gilbert were in England. Absolutely top class, a gentleman, has very good people with him, listens to what they've got to say. A fine filmmaker, of course, writer, much more than a technician, but of course had excellent people with him.
Yeah.
And you couldn't work with a nicer man than Robert Benton. I mean, he was very good with actors. Absolutely terrific. And particularly, you know, dealing with someone like Dustin, who's not easy. But I mean, Stanley, I pushed to get Dustin or Jack to come back in Eyes Wide Shut when we were looking for someone to play the role that Sidney Pollack eventually played. And Stanley thought that it was too small a role for them, you know.
Mm-hmm. Sidney Pollack is wonderful in the film, and he was a late addition, wasn't he?
Yeah, because we had a very funny deal with
Harvey Keitel.
Sorry?
Harvey Keitel, was it?
Harvey, yes. Well, he was only going to be in, of course, in the screenplay, really. He's in for a couple of scenes early on and a scene at the end. Well, of course, you know, that we had a problem with that, but when he came over for the first... So we had a 3-week deal with him or something at ridiculously high money. Well, I always knew that was going to be a disaster because we were never going to shoot the end of the film at the beginning with Stanley and Tom. That's a certainty. And, of course, we had a 14-week schedule or something ridiculous on paper.
Right.
One finished up taking, 300 days. So what happened was we did the first scene and then we did another scene and that didn't work out terribly well with a girl, and we he had to change her, and then Harvey had to go back, and then he was supposed to come back again, in about 8 or 10 weeks' time. And of course, we'd only shot a couple of scenes by that time. And then suddenly Stanley and Tom decided, well, we can't possibly shoot the end of the film, which of course was obviously going to happen. So Harvey had another movie to do, and he couldn't come back later in the year. He was booked up with films. So Tom suggested Sydney.
Yeah.
So Sydney came over for 2 weeks. He was a little, dropped his plane off in New York and came over on the Concorde. He was a bit disturbed when he came to see me the second day because he was supposed to be with us for 2 weeks or something. Mm. And Margaret, our production manager, and we decided to book him into the Basil Street Hotel for 10 weeks. He was staying with Stanley. He got this shot of his life the next day. He came in to see me. He said, why did you book the room for 10 weeks? I said, well, we've been with Stanley a long time, Sydney. He said, I've got to get back to the States. I've got Oscar. I said, oh, don't worry about that. We've stopped for that. You can go. We'll let you go. Don't have to worry about that. We've got plenty to do.
Actually, I think that Keitel probably came out with 5 movies by the time that Eyes Wide Shut.
Definitely. Tom used to keep coming to me saying, can you see the light at the end of the tunnel, Ryan? I said, see the end of the tunnel? I said, you haven't left the hotel to go to the station to get on the train yet. Don't worry, you're not getting near a tunnel. He said, I've got other films to do. I said, well... I thought to myself, Tom better get a new agent who has an open-ended deal like this with a film like Stanley,
Yeah, but
Jack, of course, didn't have that. I mean, he was. I think when we had Jack, we had 6 months, and then of course he was on huge overages. So we actually made an effort to get rid of him after a few weeks. But no, Tom was wonderful. I mean, he is a total professional. Tom Cruise. I hear all this rubbish written about him. I mean, I've known him a long time, and. He's a delight to work with, absolute gentleman.
Yeah,
and a terrific enthusiast. Very generous, nice guy, always there. He'd be there every day. Stanley would turn up 2 hours later. He was very, very good. I mean, absolutely terrific.
And they're both great in the movie. I mean, and about the movie, what are your thoughts on it? Because for me personally, it's the Kubrick movie that moves me the most.
Well, I don't know about that. I was a bit shocked when I read the script, to be honest with you, because I was sort of really imagining, knowing what I knew, that Stanley was really looking to do AI. Mm-hmm. And had been working a lot towards that, and then this came up. I guess, they were still hanging around trying to get the right CGI together to do a film like AI. But he'd been preparing it for a long time, and then this came out of the blue to do, which to me was a shock. But I thought, when everyone said to me, oh, it's a small picture, I mean, there is no such thing as a small picture with people like David Lean and Stanley Kubrick and Francis Ford Coppola. They make every movie a huge event. These guys don't just go and knock a film out for the sake of it, because they need a few quid. These are all wealthy people, and they've got to attempt to do something better than they've done before all the time, which is a tremendous strain, really. But I was a bit surprised that we were going to do a movie like that. But with Stanley, you never know what he's going to do with it. So it was interesting, but I just don't think Stanley was really that well during a lot of the picture towards the end. I was always a bit worried about him, to be honest with you. Doing such strange hours that Stanley always wanted to work, from like midday to midnight and in the studio and stuff like that. It was, pretty taxing on him.
Yeah. Do you think it's the movie? Do you think it's the movie that the finished project? Do you think it's the movie that he set out to make, that we have seen?
I felt we steered off the course of. I always imagined the idea of the film was at the end, the audience, we weren't sure whether this whole thing had been a dream or was reality. And I think we went away from that with the storyline as we went along, I mean, that was one of the things that most appealed to me at the end of the movie, that you weren't sure did this happen or didn't it happen? That was the sort of feeling of the book, I think. And we seem to have got sidetracked away from that at a tangent, I think, in many ways. But yeah, no, it's a film. It was interesting that Tom said to me afterwards, after it had come out and everything, he said that it's the only film that I've worked on where people's reviews are black and white. There's no grey reviews, which I normally get in the middle. You either like it or you hate it. I think it's very much true. Mm-hmm. I think as it goes along, it'll be, quite a defining movie on marriage, to be honest with you.
I think so.
I personally liked it, but that was just my own thoughts on it.
I loved it. I loved the film, actually.
He was very good in it, I thought, Nicole, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
She's a good actress, Nicole. She was very good in the film.
Oh, she's hypnotic in that movie. She
was very, very good. And she was quite tough with Stanley. She didn't take any nonsense from Stanley. Yeah, it's quite funny moments because, of course, we had heaps of sort of different nude shots that Stanley had come up with from books and various things. I used to have to go and give them to Nicole for her to say whether she'd prefer to do this or that. Yeah, she was fun. We had a lot of fun with Nicole, actually. She's nice. Of course, I knew her well from Billy Bathgray, living down in Australia. She's good. She's very good.
Yeah.
She's a good actress. And they were very nice. You couldn't have worked with two nicer people, really.
Before I let you go, because you've been so generous with me with your time, I have to ask you about Color Me Kubrick. Because this is correct me if I'm wrong, you've worked in producing and as first assistant director on so many projects, but this was your first
directing.
Yeah.
Well, it's the first time I've had I could afford to take a lot of time off to prepare something, because now all my kids are out working and I don't have all those problems anymore. Whereas I used to work 53 weeks a year to pay all the bills and keep a few horses and houses around the place. Now I can afford to live in a small house and try and get a couple of my own pictures off the ground, which is what I'm in the process of doing at the moment.
So you are going to direct again? I'd love to see that.
Well, I hope so. Yeah, we've got 2 or 3 projects. We've got one which Malcolm McDowell's going to do, called The Count of Comedy. Which I think is a small movie, but I think could be quite fun. Tony Frone wrote that, who wrote Color Me Kubrick. Huh. We've got several things that we're trying to do. It's like everything. It's difficult, as you know, at the moment.
Yeah.
But so hopefully, I enjoy it, really. It's a lot easier directing yourself than working with bad directors. And if you get the good cast, I had John Markovich, who was fantastic to work with, and is a great guy, a wonderful actor, and he's very good in Color Me Kubrick.
He's very good. Yeah.
He was the only person I actually ever thought of playing the part, really. Rather like Malcolm in this little thing we're doing, having to do now.
Yeah.
So we'll see, but I do all sorts of things, the old gun for hire, really. Bit of producing here and whatever, which I enjoy.
Well, I look forward to seeing anything you work on, and especially if you're behind the director's chair. I want to see another film from you.
Well, I certainly intend to do another one, that's for sure. As long as we can find someone to put some money up. That's the tough bit.
That's the hard part, yeah.
The project is easy. And they've got to be interesting, too, for me to do them, because I turn down lots of just little directing jobs of just ordinary films that have been made that really don't interest me unless I can do something that I think's interesting. I wouldn't want to do it, to be honest with you. Not after all the years that I've spent with good people.
Yeah.
I'd want to. It has to be able to get some decent actors in and be interesting enough to get them in, and so you can have a bit of fun as well with it. Something that's. Because it's very hard making a movie. It's hardest. You need a holiday after every moment. I think when you get the script eventually written, you lay it all out, you get the money, you need a holiday after that, then you prepare it, you need a holiday, shoot it, you need a holiday, do the post-production. You're knackered every section. It's really tough going. It slowly beats you down.
Yeah, and actually making the movie is I've heard it's almost a relief after going through the battle of...
Right, yeah, because, you just... it's so... That's the easy bit, making the film. I think what he says is true. Once you've got a good crew and you know what you're doing, and some good actors and the script pretty much set, I mean, that's standard procedure. You just hope that that it's good.
Mm-hmm.
But all the other stuff that's the tough bit, all the arguments at the end and all the arguments at the front about the money and the deals and all the bullshit that goes with it, and listening to everybody else's idea. I mean, these people are all experts once the film's been made.
Mm-hmm.
None of them got any ideas when you actually do it.
Right, that's right, yeah.
And not one of them's got any idea before the script's written, but they've all got plenty of ideas once the script appears. I mean, it's sort of the same old nonsense that we get all the time. But I mean, I feel, the guys you've got to be tough. You've got to be the Brian De Palmas who doesn't want to talk to too many people, and James Cameron's, Michael Mann's, Stanley Kubrick's, David Lean's. These are the sort of guys. You've got to be like that to make it to the very, very top and stay there.
Yeah, yeah.
You can't be messed around with a lot of these jokers who you see on one movie and you never see them again.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, producers. And of course, today everyone's a producer. You just look at the credits, And you've got everybody's wife, girlfriend, mistress, kids. Everybody's on board. Agents, lawyers.
Yeah. And they make movies that last. I mean, with Kubrick's films, I'm revisiting them after I first saw them, over 20 years ago, and they deepened for me.
2001 last year again, terrific. I mean, a lot of it stands up today, some of the effects, and that was like 1965. Really fantastic effects and things in these movies, and some of the Stanley stuff. I mean, the difference was David Lean, my father always used to say, was the best in his view of people he'd worked with, was the best storyteller of great novels and bringing them to the screen. But Stanley was a great visionary, and I think that those two are the greatest filmmakers that have during my period of time. Well, I mean, I'm talking about people who worked from this part of the world, not people who worked basically from America. Of course, there's been some half a dozen of the top guys there are really fantastic filmmakers. Well, and, there are some. It should really, I always think, be made into. Should be like football leagues. Really, these directors should be marked up as the Premier League, Division 1, Division 2, Division 3, and Division 4. They should be seeded, really. You shouldn't have them all in as a director.
Right.
And they should be leagued up, is what I feel. So straight away you're dealing with some idiot.